Local, or are you just interested in seeing what's going on in the creative section and seeing what the various people are doing? It's quite an interesting area. There's lots generally going on most nights, and a heck of a range of crafts that you see being done. I think tonight I've seen people making chainmail, cross stitch. I know later on there'll be people sculpting with clay and with a wax-like clay material. There's people creating 3D images, screen printing t-shirts. Yeah, I think the weather like, well, for us in the UK, weather's like that, like we've had today, can also be a little bit like that, in that it can be cold, but if you put a coat on, you're too hot, and you end up sweating and what have you. And even if you sort of open the coat up so that you cool down, you still end up sweating. We get some really weird effects like that. Alternatively, it could just be me. Okay. Well, in that case, then I hope my English is comprehensible to you. Of course, like any native speaker, we do tend to speak rather fast, and I know that can make listening to it from a second language perspective as quite awkward and difficult. Well, as a general rule, I do try and, whilst I'm streaming, I do try and talk slower than I normally do. That's a learned behaviour. I used to teach people some technical subjects, and when you're talking very rapidly like you would in a conversation, it actually makes it difficult for people to follow you in a lecture situation. So I've learnt to slow down, and also by slowing down I've learnt to leave out a lot of the fillers that English people put in, and that's words like and and things like that, which are just verbal fillers because they're speaking faster than they're thinking, and they need to insert something because they don't like the silence whilst they think of the next word. So I've learnt to avoid doing that as well. Hopefully that makes it a bit easier for you to follow. But you might not realise, but a lot of people have said my voice is kind of soothing and has a tendency to make them sleepy, so you may wish to be careful. You may end up finding that you are waking up when you hadn't realised you'd been asleep. And I stress, they've said that about my voice, not about what they're watching on stream. But if they had said about that it was what they were seeing on stream, it kind of wouldn't surprise me. These sorts of crafts or art forms take a reasonably long length of time to develop. I'm going to be doing most of this cat's face, and this evening I have really just done this amount of area so far and a little bit down the nose. And that's in over an hour of stream, and it's by no means the only pass that I will do over this section of the face. So it does take a while to see results on stream, and I think a lot of the creative streamers do find that to be a difficult thing for them to deal with. That often people who have seen some crafts done before, they've seen them done on YouTube where the time lapse is used a lot, and the time lapse of course creates a false impression of how quickly something takes. and I know quite a few people have said to me in streams, you know, why is it taking so long? And in actual fact, it's probably going faster than it normally would. Oh, was it you that said that the first time? I know somebody said it to me the first time. In fact, they used a term which I didn't understand at the time. So, welcome back then, if it was indeed you, Holocol. Glad to see you back. That probably means that you saw me doing this other picture which I finished, and you've maybe not seen what I've done in the meantime. But I've got another area of wood here, just in this area here, which doesn't take the colour very well. What you find when you're doing this is you develop a rhythm with something in an area like this. When you come to a bit of wood which doesn't quite do what you expect, and I'm getting a little white spot here, it breaks that rhythm, and I say the wood is being difficult or it's been a bit awkward. In actual fact, it's just one of those things that I have to deal with as the artist, so to speak. And it's not actually awkward, it just means I've got to slow down and change the rhythm slightly. But it kind of sometimes throws you out of the moment. When you get into a rhythm of doing things like this, it gets very, a word that often gets used is therapeutic, but you get lost in what you're doing and you just carry on and don't realise quite the time is passing, and then something like that just throws you out of it and you start having to think again, as opposed to almost working it on an automatic pilot. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you've managed to visit had an opportunity to visit in between, but having done this particular pussycat, we then did I'll show you. Let me just put that to one side. And good evening, Bubbles the Monkey. How are you this evening? We then did a scraper board, which is the very first time. I don't know if you saw that, but this is piece that I did on scraper board. This is the very, very, very first piece of scraper board I've even touched, and that was the image that we did of a musician who has been in the UK charts and international charts. So a guy called John Miles, not been in the charts for a while because he's progressed his music career in a different direction. So we did that. And after that we did a piece of carving, which has then been painted after that, but we've got a rose that was carved out of ash on stream and then painted, which we did the night before last. And then we started another cat piece this evening. This is one I've been asked to do to go with this one. So these two cats live with each other. I'm fine, thank you, Bubbles the Monkey. Thank you, by the way, for that link for the that bead thing. It looked good, so I've ordered a kit. I was fascinated by it before, but I ordered the large kit because it wasn't too expensive, and I was interested to have a go with it. So thank you very much for letting me have that link yesterday. I will. Has yours arrived yet? Because I believe you had ordered you mentioned you'd ordered a kit. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what you make of it. I am going to go back over this little bit. It's bugging me a little bit that it's coming out so light, so I'm going to go back over it in the opposite with the piece upside down, just to darken it down a little bit, because I am not quite seeing the piece as I would like to see it. It's throwing my visualization off a little bit, and the banding that I've created is also making that a little bit awkward for me. So what I've done is turning the piece the other way up, which is this way, and I'm going to just go over it again, turning it over, because what's happening, in fact it was the other way, what's happening is I'm creating a groove, but I'm only putting colour on one side of the groove, so that's why you're getting this somewhat lighter effect. So if I go over with the wood the opposite direction, what I will then do is colour the other side of the groove, and it will darken off quite a bit fairly quickly, and I should then also be able to get rid of the banding effect. No, I got the full colour one to start with, I thought. So I did look at the grayscale one. The grayscale was kind of a limited colour palette rather than a grayscale, but no, I have no objection to the grayscale, but I kind of would like to just see how I get on doing full colour things, which is kind of surprising given that I've been doing a lot of monochrome work. You might think the grayscale would be something that attracted me, but I might try it later. What did surprise me is I've looked at the other bead manufacturers, and these beads are relatively cheap compared with some of the others. I don't know if that's just because, of course, these are in Europe and the others are sourced from elsewhere, but if you're wondering what we're talking about, holocaust, we're talking about, well, most people know them, I guess, as perler beads. I've kind of seen a few people doing them on Twitch, bead work and then the iron the beads to fuse them together. And it kind of fascinated me because I am interested in art made up of pixels. So you actually see the dots, so to speak, and the bead forms interested me because of that. And Bubbles last night gave me a link to a particular application that can be used to translate a picture into the patterns, and the manufacturer that was able to also supply the beads. So I'm looking forward to when that arrives in several days' time. Seeing, well, I may or may not do the first one on stream, we shall see. And I will have to do is think of a suitable subject to try it with. I'm not one necessarily for doing things easy, so I'll probably pick a really awkward pattern. Yeah, light pinks and colours. Yeah, that's what I saw. Oh, okay. Holocaust. Yeah, there seem to be quite a few people doing it, and I've seen quite a few YouTubers as well. that's kind of what I know. What seemed to have picked up on Bubbles was that the perler stuff seemed to melt the best, and I'd been looking for a lot of that. But as you note there, it does seem quite expensive. Probably, I guess, because it seems, I'm not sure where it's manufactured, but it's predominantly States based is where most of the suppliers seem to be, and very few in Europe at all. And Hammer, of course, yes. And there's another one as well that I can't recall now that seemed to be used quite a bit, so this would kind of make 4. Yes, go ahead, Bubbles, that will be acceptable. You know, Holocall, by the time you finish watching creative streams, you'll be inspired to try some of the art forms yourself. You know, you won't be able to help yourself. You'll be brainwashed into some of the artwork. Okay, that's a long link. Oh, grayscale. Okay. By which I mean I actually can't tell what it is. Is it intended to represent something, or is it just an abstract design? Bubbles, it could be that I just can't visualise it. It sort of seems to have a structure to it that first thing I thought of was a mask, but it's not. And are those clear beads? I must have missed seeing clear beads. I guess they're from under the other ranges, are they? I know this particular manufacturer, they seem to suggest just using double-sided sticky tape, and I thought, I can see them dropping off after a little while if it's in a warm room. And I see looking at that there, you iron these, don't you? They look to be fused to me anyway. Tell us a little bit more about it. How would you actually find working with them? I've seen people picking up the beads and putting them in place by hand. I've seen people using tweezers. Have you developed any particular useful technique for doing it? I see you've got the tweezers there, or I have seen I think it was the perler where they've developed, or perler seller, a bead placer, and I thought that thing looks harder to use than using your fingers. Okay, I don't watch, daft as it sounds, I've got Final Fantasy X for probably a PlayStation or PlayStation 2, which is quite a long time ago, but I've never played it. I've never actually seen Final Fantasy X, so that's why I'm not actually recognising it then. So thank you for letting me know. Oh, these are 2.6mm. Okay, rather than the 5. They're the Hammer ones, aren't they? The 2.6. I haven't seen any manufacturer do other than them that seem to do those small ones, because I kind of like the idea of the small ones because you get more pixels per inch basically, and that strikes me for the sort of thing that I'd be interested in doing, which is a picture, like the rose or a scene, photography, whether it's I design it or not, but it strikes me the 2.6 I get more pixels in and therefore have a clearer looking picture in the same size. So I was kind of looking at those 2.6, but it looked relatively expensive to obtain a decent palette of colours to start with, but I've sort of looked at them and kept going and not quite pushing the button to buy them. I must admit I didn't actually intend to get any of these beads until later on this year when I've got a bit more space in the studio, but the price was extremely tempting for what was quite a large quantity of beads in those starter kits. Oh, I've not heard of Art Cal. Oh, I can see I've got a lot to learn, haven't I? Of all the different manufacturers around, as well as the no-named brands as well, I guess. Starter kit for... Oh, okay. I was about to say, I haven't really seen any, but I actually think probably our only local craft shop. I think I've seen some of those like small kits, 50 bead type kits, and with a heart-shaped pegboard, but that's all. Do you find them particularly difficult to iron? I'm about to say it strikes me as it's probably just a case of needing the patience to keep the heat going and etc. until you've achieved the right effect. But patience seems, having discussed patience and things like I'm doing here earlier this evening, it struck me as a bit funny to say that. When a lot of people that I've read about seem to have a great deal of problem with the ironing and actually getting them to melt, and I'm not quite sure whether that's just people's aversion perhaps to using hot irons for things like that, or whether it really is down to something inherent in doing it. Okay, and there you go, you've mentioned an SES brand. That's another one I've not heard of. I guess if you lump all the manufacturers together, you've probably got an immense range of in the colour palette that you could actually use, but then maybe you have a difficulty if they use slightly different plastics, getting them all to merge. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I have seen some, don't know what beads they were, but where they have virtually gone square. As you say, the hole's virtually closed up and they've gone square rather than being just a fused bead. But I guess that comes from actually applying the pressure, doesn't it? Because the heat will be transferred. Once you've got enough heat on one side, if you push down too hard, then I guess it impacts on the other side. Interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to it. If I can find something that I want to do, that is. I can probably just as easily leave it in its box for a few months as well if I don't actually find something, because I know me, it's going to be a case of I've got to find an image that's worthy of doing, and I don't want to waste the beads until I do. And I know it's not like that at all. It's not wasting. It's but it's it's a joke that I make about myself, which is, being a Yorkshireman, the definition of a Yorkshireman is a tight-fisted Scotsman. And if anybody's not familiar with that terminology, the Scots it's an archetype that they are very frugal. They don't spend money on anything. Like any archetypes, it's not true, but it's just one of those things. And tight-fisted is a way of saying they're frugal. They don't spend money unnecessarily. So a Yorkshireman being a tight-fisted Scotsman is just exaggerates the joke a little bit. But I am somewhat like that sometimes with art materials. I don't want to use them unless I've got something that's worthy, and of course the worthy bit means I expect to get a good result, but I haven't been able to practice because I'm saving the material, so I know I'm not going to get a good result the first or second time or whatever, and it's counterproductive, but it's still a very difficult thing for me to overcome within myself. Oh yeah, no, there was to some extent, Bubbles the Monkey, there was no way I was going to buy the mixed sets. I really am not into sorting. I mean, I guess it's part of the fun sometimes of the medium, is it? Doing things like that, but it really struck me as something I would possibly not enjoy doing. Although, having said which, I suppose I could just as easily just sit down and do it, but when they're available pre-sorted in bags, then I kind of not. I'd rather get on with the artwork than sort out the materials, but it's something I hadn't thought about. But yeah, I've got plenty of toothpicks, as you saw on the stream when I was painting. Don't have a problem with toothpicks. I've got a 3D printer in a box, which I literally haven't got the space to put, never mind construct it. But I keep thinking of was there a way in which I could actually create a scoop or something which would at least line all the beads up so that to put them on a pegboard you could fairly easily drop them in, well, no matter what size they were. And that's probably going to be a fun in quotes project for next winter. See if I can do something like that. Because I can imagine the action of picking a bead up, putting it down, picking a bead up, putting it down. It actually gets quite tiring on your hands and arms. Oh, that's contract out the sorting in exchange for a coffee. That seems like a really good deal, Bubbles to Monkey. Does that? Not sure any of my neighbours would be that interested, but and actually, I suppose if you get 2 or 3 of you doing it, because you can hold a conversation quite easily while you're doing it. It's not like you're trying to watch a program or a stream and sort at the same time, and you're having to look up and down. If you're in a group and you're all doing that, then yeah, I can see that actually being quite fun to do. Now this is successfully going darker brown, which I'm really pleased about, and I'm losing the tram lines. Oh, 22,000 beads. Yeah, the quantities creep up on you, don't they? I mean, you just one of those panels, 30